another edition of the Blue White Tailgate Podcast. Andrew Calista, Frank Bonanni here this week. And of course, it is not a quiet week on the Penn State athletics front. Some naming rights to go on, Frank. As we want to wish Mike Gross. He's feeling a little bit under the weather. Can't make the podcast this week. So I did want to throw that out there. Sorry, Mike. I put you behind the top billing of West Shore home field at Beaver Stadium. No naming rights here. We are still pure to our roots, not chasing that dollar, Mr. Bodani. But let's start there. A couple of days ago, I was more fired up. I was ready to record the podcast as soon as this came out. I had great one-liners. I've since calmed down a little bit about this, but you lead off. Take us through West Shore home field at Beaver Stadium.
Well, I mean, in this day and age, maybe I go with what kind of the way Pat Kraft explained it is that they started negotiations, so to speak, with West Shore Home last summer. And maybe it was about luxury boxes or whatever else that a big donor may want to put their money in. And then he said the conversation expanded, turned to bigger things, bigger gift money. And I'm thinking, in this day and age, someone's willing to put $50 million on the line for you, especially when you're renovating the entire, like the world's, fourth largest stadium or whatever Beaver Stadium is, you're renovating that. Someone's willing to basically help you with $50 million. We come to an agreement that, we can put your name on the field. I don't know. It seems like that's the price of doing business in big-time college sports. I mean, if other schools are doing it, you look around the Big Ten, how many schools have some sort of naming rights? I mean, Minnesota plays in their stadium named after a bank.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State, of all teams, right, has their field with a name that's not free. Obviously, Safe Light Auto Field. I didn't even know that was a thing until this came up. I never knew it was anything at all but Ohio Stadium or the Horseshoe. And that goes in we'll finish it up with this point. People to me are still just going to call it Beaver Stadium. I mean, this is an advertising donation situation that, to me, it's similar to the bowl game names, the crazy sponsors of bowl games. I don't ever call the Sugar Bowl anything but the Sugar Bowl or the Orange Bowl anything but the Orange Bowl. But sure, there's financial agreements that the name is different per se, but to me, it's still Beaver Stadium, and they're going to get $50 million for this. So this is college football, big-time college football in 2025.
Scott Paterno, I wanted to hit on what Scott Paterno tweeted out after this, because obviously there is a lot of, I don't want to say anger, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it is anger. Actually, I'll go with anger. Do you think anger is a proper word?
Yes. Certainly for some segments, anger would be there, I think.
Scott Paterno tweeted out, and Scott has always been on the Penn State football train. He's always been on that, and that is one thing I will say. When James Franklin has been calling for whiteouts, Scott Paterno has been there since 2014, pumping up the football program, no matter who was the head coach, and separating issues aside on that. So Scott Paterno tweeted out, other issues aside, let's not lose sight of what's important here. A Pennsylvania kid who went to Penn State, got a degree, worked hard, built a business, and then use that success to give back to PSU. This is something that Joe, referring to his father, often advocated for and celebrated. Let's do the same. Thanks, at West Shore Home. So that's from Scott Paterno, which I think is a very good message. And the message within that tweet, I think, is very good, that people shouldn't lose sight of it. Michael Motti tweeted out after this deal, I played for Joe Paterno. My dad played for Joe. My brother played for Joe. Certain his legacy isn't about the name on the field. It's about what we do on it and the impact we make outside the lines. Very true words, in my opinion. He continues, in my opinion, the best way to honor him is to go win a national title. Let's get aligned around that we are. So that's Michael Mahdi's take. Everybody else from fan groups that I've seen, this is the cost of doing business. Do we want to compete and win, or do we not want to compete and win? And I understand all of that in this day and age. But I'll look at those same people that are saying, I went to Penn State in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and I believed in this, and this is what I do. So what makes Penn State special and different? I know that was a question posed to Sandy Barber. And Penn Staters believe that they're so different because of how they carried themselves. It wasn't always about winning. So if it's not all about winning, are you admitting that you've now changed? Your ideals have changed if you're the fan base? That's my posing question. And me as a Syracuse grad, and again, I grew up a Penn State person, but I'm a Syracuse grad. The way Ohio State announced their field naming with Safe Flight was much more downplayed. It didn't carry a press release that said, welcome to Safe Flight Field at Ohio Stadium. It basically was an advertisement done on the turf. Yes, some Ohio State fans were upset about it, but really it didn't carry that much weight. At the same time, when people are saying, well, North Carolina does this, Purdue does this, Minnesota, Syracuse, Louisville, I'm not hearing Texas, Alabama, and those type of schools, and those are Penn State's peers. Michigan, I'm not hearing either. That's my argument against the way this one was carried out. And again, I think it's great that this family has the money to put 10 millions up and then over time pay off the rest to help with renovations and put their name on a field in a marketing ploy for their company.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the approach that Scott Paterno had. Same with Mike Mowdy. They're both right. I think this gets a little clouded in some people's perspective because it's two different, in a sense, it could be two different issues here. There's a lot of people who believe, who are longtime fans of Penn State and Joe Paterno, that he's not recognized. He's not anywhere close to his due when it comes to Beaver Stadium and Penn State football. And I would agree with that in the sense that you could walk into Beaver Stadium and attend a game and maybe not ever know that man coached there, which is crazy to me in a sense. He was a head coach for 46 years. I mean, I know there's issues going on, okay, of course, with the scandal and sanctions and the last decade and more, right? So, but in the end, he was still a legendary coach. He's the all-time winningest coach in college football history. And you would not know the man coached there. So that's an issue that I think that's really rough for people to deal with, a certain segment of the fan base. I don't think these have to be exactly completely married, renaming the field and being upset that Joe's not recognized the way they feel he should be. I think they don't have to be joined together. And I think that's kind of what Scott and Mike in a way are saying without saying it. This is about a situation in college football and it's about economics. And I think it got a lot of publicity because of the feelings that we just mentioned about Joe Paterno. I don't think a press release is really, I mean, Penn State wants to do that. It's a huge gift, right? The second largest gift ever given, private gift behind Terry Pagula ever given to Penn State. So sure, promote it, right? They promoted the other gifts that people have given to the stadium renovations and such. So I don't have an issue with that per se. I think how do you turn down how would Joe turn down $50 million in this situation? I don't think so. I think Penn State fans saying that Penn State is different, feeling it's different, is not about $50 million and the name on the field. It's about not even that it's more than winning. To me, it's about how you go about winning, because I always believed that Joe was an intense winner, so to speak, a competitor as anyone ever was. But I think His core belief is you can win. You just can't, you need to win a certain way, or you need to not have these certain outside influences muddy your winning. You got to win a certain way. But it was always still about performing at your best, about representing yourself at your best, about winning at your best. It was how you do it. And I think this doesn't change any of that to me.
I wanted to read, Brandon Short sent me this as I reached out to Brandon Short and a couple other members of the Board of Trustees. Brandon got back to me with an actual kind of statement. He said he wouldn't be able to make the show this week. A couple other trustee members said they might be able to join later on. So Brandon Short's statement that he sent me said, "I'm a proud product of the grand experiment, and I love Coach Joe Paterno. No matter where you stand on this issue, there are a lot of alumni who believe Joe was mistreated and view naming the field after Joe as a way to make things right. I believe Penn State has a bright future, and the future is much more important than the past. However, I don't believe Penn State can reach its full potential by telling all these alumni to simply move forward. As a result, while I appreciate this generous contribution and partnership with the university, I will vote no on naming the field." To me, that was an important no vote from Brandon on that segment of the alumni, because there's been some tension on that, and Brandon has been a full vocal supporter of everything Penn State has done since hiring James Franklin. So to me, that was important.
Sure, I think, Brandon, and I think it goes back to your feelings about the Joe and the way the university has treated him or not treated him more recently. So I think to some people, it's a flashpoint on, well, the way we need to make this right is to name the field after him. I just think there's other ways to so-called, quote unquote, make this right. It doesn't have to be about the field name, So I'm saying is that, here's the thing how can you guarantee someone else is going to give you $50 million or more if you don't accept this deal and you just say that, well, all the people who support Joe Paterno would just open up their pockets and give you donations? Well, you don't know that. And I want to, any business person, right-minded business person can show me proof that would happen if you named a field after Joe, that all of a sudden you're going to get an outpouring of financial donations you can bank on. To me, this is reality. This is, you got to pay bills. And this is an appropriate way to do this, to get $50 million. Now, the other idea is going forward, I think there is a separate question on his legacy and this stadium, and how do you recognize him going forward? Because I think that is, to me, that is a huge, that's got to be dealt with. Or because there is not what's the right word? I mean, there's not a cohesion. There's not a wholeness to me about Penn State football in regards to its history with Joe Paterno.
Just finishing up to give both sides of Brandon's statement on this, because I feel this is important. He says a couple other things, much of what you just said, Frank, about there's other ways to honor Joe. And I believe the majority, he continues, I believe the majority of the board recognizes Joe's contribution to Penn State and is open to honoring it. That said, one of the main reasons the board has not been able to build a consensus is disruptive and inappropriate behavior of a group of trustees who claim they want to honor Joe. The blame for not getting this done falls on them. These trustees have actively worked to undermine the current football program and broader university. Goes on, they've said publicity stunts. They've tried to hurt the current football program by spreading misinformation. They've leaked selected information to the press and told half-truths in interviews to undermine Penn State leadership and paint leadership in a bad light. I'm assuming that's targeted at certain board of trustees as individuals. I'm not quite sure if Jay Paterno is included in that group of trustees. We could assume, I'm not going to assume publicly on if Jay is involved in or included in that statement. But I do believe there's been missteps in the board of trustees, and throughout this decade plus, I believe the board has lacked leadership to be able to come together as a whole, whether it's one side that is screaming and yelling on meetings or one side that just quiets dissents and does everything behind closed door sessions. And I do believe that as Penn State preached transparency coming out of the Jerry Sandusky scandal, Penn State is, if not more closed, or at least as closed as it was back then. A transparency website that never had anything put to it. These were all buzzwords, you know? And when the sanctions got taken out, asked my boss up in State College, I gave him a question, and he asked Senator George Mitchell, who's been naming other explosive reports that the general voting public is waiting to see from the Attorney General's office of the United States. Oh, he said the culture at Penn State changed. We pressed him on the questions. Give 3 examples of how the culture at Penn State has changed. And George Mitchell couldn't. And it was all this transparency thing. So that's another thing I think that angers the fan base is Penn State's lack of leadership that continues to struggle.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about, we all on board together? And James Franklin has brought that up a lot in terms of football and support and athletic support. But I think it goes beyond that. I mean, I don't think there was any type of togetherness feeling we're all in the same motion with the previous leadership of the university. And there's been I don't think there's been that feeling overall since 2011 for sure. And maybe that's changing. I think sports-wise, athletically, I think it is changing. It seems to be that notion that Penn State athletics is driving in the same direction now, and that they seem to be more focused in their support financially and otherwise, and where the teams are headed. I think there is a feeling of that, at least now, that there wasn't that even 5 years ago.
We'd love to hear your well thought out comments here on the Blue White Tailgate Podcast. Email the show, BlueWhiteTailgatePawcast@gmail.com. Also, could reach out to Frank, could reach out to Mike. Emails will get to us, and we'd love to hear from that. I don't think the issue is going to be going away. I do think early in the season, I'm not going to say there'll be a protest, but I do believe there'll be some visible and vocal dissent around events going on at Beaver Stadium during the season. Maybe depending on the level that it has during the blue-white game, I do think there's going to be something, I don't want to say protest, but maybe signs, things like that. And again, I'm a very big traditionalist. I think there's other ways to take $50 million that are even more impactful, or not more impactful, but are just as viewed and just as public for West Shore Home to put their names on things related to Penn State to satisfy their marketing needs and also say thank you very much for your gift. I mean, heck, I would be open to pushing the college townships around to change it so that West Shore Home could be on the outside of the new press box that's going to be coming up on the west side. Make that visible. Nothing else is around. I do think there's other ways to find a happy medium, and I do think the money aspect to be able to sell this and rename a stadium West Shore Home Field at Beaver Stadium, I think puts you in more with the Syracuse, Louisvilles of the world than it does with the Michigan of the world. And I am aware it's United Airlines Field at the Coliseum, but that's a whole different public university ownership deal that gets quite muddy. The city of LA and the state of California has to maintain the Coliseum. Any other closing thoughts on that topic, Mr. Bodine?
No, I think we'll have plenty to go forward with. I think you're right. And the thing is that the thing that complicates this too, to me at least, is Beaver Stadium is a construction zone right now. Like, we don't even know what the blue-white game is going to really look like. How are they exactly going to pull that off by the end of April? So you also have this, it's not just a stadium that has always been there that's sitting there. You have one that's in turmoil of its own, as they're going to have to play games and hold events in something that's being actively torn down and rebuilt. So that's a whole nother fascinating turn to this.
With construction going on behind it at the soccer field. It's not just the construction at Beaver Stadium.
Right.
Hopefully there's construction going on behind the Bryce Jordan Center pretty soon for a new basketball practice facility, and I'll keep beating that drum because the Jordan Center is not sufficient for a Division I basketball program in the facilities for both the Lady Lions and Penn State men's hoops, and those athletes and coaches deserve better on that front. Wrestling. We move on from controversy. There is no controversy, but what a disappointment. What a disappointment for Penn State at the Big Ten Wrestling Championships. And if you know me, I'm smiling inside when I say this because they only had 5 champions.
What? Only 5. I know. Well, but the thing is, yeah, when your expectations are so high, how do you really truly meet them? Well, here's what it is. No matter that they had some guys lose early, no matter that even, unfortunately, one of their starters got injured, at the end of the day, they didn't just win. They set a school record for team points at the Big Ten Championship. So despite all those other so-called concerns, they still, in a sense, did better than they ever had. And I think that's Cale Sanderson's mark, because when you have 8 guys that are ranked 1 or 2 in the country, how do you legitimately hold up to that unless literally everyone wins? Okay, so that's not going to happen. So as a team, they still dominated in the end. So I guess it's, we don't, gosh, I mean, they haven't lost a match in 5 years. Here's the other thing. I'll use this to describe wrestling. What other sport, I don't know what level we're talking, college, pro, whatever, what other sport could you be a fan of and buy a ticket and be guaranteed that you're going to go to that event and your team is going to win? Going to. Every time. Pretty much. I mean, that's just crazy to me. And I think they're going to, in whatever way they do, they're going to carry that on next week in Philadelphia when they're going to be, it doesn't seem any way possible they're not going to win their 12th national championship in the last 14 years.
Yeah, and I'm being facetious when I say they didn't hold up their bar because, again, if there's one sport that is so difficult, it's individual. So many things could happen. And I always go back to Bo Nickel's legacy is 4 seconds away from being completely different with that Miles Martin match where he takes him right to his back. I mean, you would just look at Bo Nickel in a completely different manner, but it creates this aura and this glow about him when he walks past you, just for me, because of that one match. And that's how close we are. David Taylor pulling ankle picks. What would David Taylor's place in the wrestling community is secure if he beats Kyle Dake. What's Kyle Dake's legacy if Kyle Dake doesn't get 4 national championships in a row at 4 different weights? These are all things that are debatable when you look at them in a vacuum.
And here's one other real quick thing. So the Big Ten championships, we got to view them in the proper perspective, at least as Penn State looks at it. They've always been looked at for Penn State as a training regimen. Yep. Okay. So to put all the focus on how they actually perform result wise is not really fair because, I mean, they've won 11 of the last 13 national championships, but they had only won 8 Big Tens during that same time. They won more national titles than they did league titles. So that's evidence how Penn State views this. And wrestling, and maybe it's a unique sport like swimming or another sport, but they're using this as preparation for what they view as the most important. So the results are more important for them in nationals, especially individually, I think, than it is for them at Big Tens.
You're supposed to peak in 2 weeks or a week and a half from right now, not last weekend. That is how it's done. And I remember the first time it happened where they were supposed to win Big Tens. I think they finished 3rd and then went on to win the national championship. So
it's hard to wrap your head around that, I think, as a fan or even a media member, because that's not the way it usually ever works in a sport. But it does here. And I think we have to always remind ourselves of that. And, you know, they have 5 guys, or they have 4 guys who are seeded number 1 at next week's championship, seeded number 1. But that does not mean that they will not have more than 4 guys in the Saturday night championship bouts. Just because they didn't get more number 1 seeds, that we're going back to who guys are peaking, and are guys going to wrestle their best. And I think I would bet a good bit of money that they have more than 4 guys in the championship finals.
What, I know you're knee deep in preparation, getting ready for next week, but health wise, you mentioned the injury. Can you just fill us in on how we know the lineup is going to be what it was, but how do they come out of this, and what do you expect to see at nationals? Not from the top 4 guys that are the number 1 seeds, and we expect returning champs that even aren't number 1 seeds to make it to the finals. But what are you expecting from the lineup throughout? Are you expecting 10 All-Americans? And do you see anybody making a surprise run, not only being on the podium, but also reaching a semifinal or a final?
Well, they qualified all 10 guys, and all 10 starters are ranked 8 or seeded 8th or higher. So the cutoff for being an All-American is finishing 8th or better. So the seeds would say that they could become just the 2nd team ever to have 10 All-Americans at nationals. Minnesota did it in 2001. Now, the reality, though, is that that's really difficult because things happen, so to speak, right? I mean, guys are not guaranteed to win, say, 3 matches or battle their way back through the whole consolation bracket to finish in the top 8. And Penn State has 8 guys right now seated, I think, 3rd or higher. Okay, but there's 2 guys that are not, and one of them is injured, and that's Josh Barr. So the problem there is that we do not know if he can wrestle or what level he can wrestle, because he could look like he couldn't put any weight on his left leg when he left the match just last Sunday. So what shape will he be at? If he's healthy, he's an All-American. If he can't wrestle, he's not. And if he can't wrestle close enough to 100%, maybe he can't finish in the top 8. We won't know that till next week. That's number 1. And then number 2 is their sophomore Braden Davis at 133 pounds, has also dealt with injury issues, and he's just been up and down all year. And I think part of it's injury related, but I think it's going to be tough for me to think that he's a guaranteed All-American top 8 finisher because of his struggles and because he has a really tough bracket now, being the 8th seed. And then lastly, the other guy I would bring up is their freshman, their 125 pounder, Luke Lillidahl, who is the number 1 seed in the nation now at 125 pounds as a true freshman, because he just won Big Tens and he just beat an undefeated wrestler to do it. But he's a true freshman. So I think it's a little difficult to predict how he will do from, say, his 3rd match on, because he's never done this before. Maybe he'll do really well, like, say, Levi Haynes did a couple of years ago as a freshman, make it all the way to finals. Or maybe he'll be a little bit more like Braden Davis was last year, who was number 1 in the country at 125 and didn't reach All-American status. I think it's hard to tell. I think I would guess 8 or 9 All-Americans. They had 8 last year. We'll go with 9 this year would be my prediction. I'm thinking they get at least, I think they get 5 really good bets for national title winners.
I feel like 125 in heavyweight, the bookends, are the biggest crapshoots when it comes to freshman wrestlers and performing. I don't know why I feel that way, but like Nico Megaludis, great wrestler, and it took him a while to claim that national championship, when he was at Penn State. I just feel, and I use him as an example. There's other guys that haven't had that problem, but I always feel 125 and heavyweight are the guys. Any concern with Van Ness and his I don't want to say conditioning, but he just seemed less aggressive and in less attack mode at Big Tens.
Well, he's had a couple moments. He's had 3 or 4 matches this year. Now, of course, we remind people he missed basically all of last year to injury. very promising wrestler as a freshman, missed almost all of last season. So he's coming back trying to regain everything he wasn't able to kind of do last year. And overall, he's done really well. He's had but because he's so highly regarded and people are so expecting him to just pick off where he left off and be better, he's had a few moments that have been head scratching, I think, to fans, where he's gotten beat and at times gotten beat decisively. And yet his other matches have been complete wins. I mean, just like great moments. So, and that was the Big Tens. He lost a match that I don't think anybody envisioned him losing to start the tournament at the beginning, but he finished tremendously. He basically then went on a scoring rampage to finish third overall and beat his last 2 or 3 guys the way that everybody thought he should have started. So where does he go? To me, he's like the best bet kind of in the middle, meaning I kind of not going to predict him to get to the finals, but be right there at third or fourth place. I mean, I don't think he's a risk to lose early. And here's the thing. He could lose early like Tyler Kasak did last year, but he has the ability to storm his whole way back through the consolation bracket and still be an All-American at the end. So
very good stuff. Very good stuff. Philadelphia is going to be insane. I'm jealous that I'm missing this one.
I'd be interested because, last year, my first experience in Kansas City was this interesting, they filled the arena at the T-Mobile Center, but it was this interesting, to me at least, combination of pockets of fans from all over the country rooting for their guys. And really that's it. And Penn State didn't have a tremendous, it's not like Penn State took over Kansas City or anything with their fan base. And in the end, there was like a few dozen fans celebrating Penn State's 11th national title, right? That's it. Yeah. I'll be interested to see what this makeup is going to be like at nationals, being that it's the home state fans, so to speak, home state arena. I mean, are they going to fill it up with Penn State fans? I don't know.
I don't know. The season ticket holders, the Nittany Lion points that were required to get tickets, it was high. I mean, it was super high. Put it this way, it was way higher than getting tickets to the Orange Bowl, getting tickets to the Rose Bowl. It was, so demand is there. However, whatever the allocation is, and I think the wrestling finals for the NCAA is one of the great sporting experiences in the country. And when they put it on the East Coast, it's awesome. It is. Madison Square Garden was awesome. Pittsburgh, great. Philadelphia, we'll see. I mean, Philadelphia has a lot to live up to, but Madison Square Garden really sticks out to me as being awesome, and just the way the fans interact afterwards. Yeah, I mean, it's all, you're going out, you're getting adult sodas in between sessions, and everybody's having a good time. Right. This Penn State Iowa rivalry, everybody that's there, they're all having a great time. Taking little jabs at each other. Phenomenal stuff. It's what sports is all about. And I want to wish all the Pennsylvania wrestlers good luck coming up into the tournament. I hope all 8 places are filled with Pennsylvania-born kids as All-Americans. I want to give a special shout-out to a Lock Haven wrestler, Colin Fegley. His mom was one of my high school teachers. Great wrestling family, great wrestling coaches within that family. He qualified for nationals at 184 from Lock Haven, and he's from my alma mater in high school.
There's going to be a good many, not just Pennsylvania-born wrestlers, but a lot of Pennsylvania college wrestlers that aren't at Penn State that are in the tournament from, say, Lock Haven, from Penn, from Bucknell, from different. So there's a lot of Pennsylvania, so to speak, wrestlers beyond the Nittany Lions. And there's also going to be a few former Penn State wrestlers who are now with other teams who will be wrestling in the tournament and going up possibly against Penn State wrestlers. And one of the best ones could be at 165, where Mitchell Messenbrink, one of the almost guaranteed favorites to win this thing, may have to wrestle a former teammate in Terrell Barrowclaw, who's now, I think, at Utah Valley State, possibly. But he had a tremendous year after transferring from Penn State last year. And he's in the tournament, and he's a pretty high seed. So,
Edmund Ruth, another storyline. Kid from Susquehanna Township, right outside of Harrisburg. We all know what Ed did. Edmund out at Illinois. I believe he's finished third at Big Tens, so has a good seed in a stacked bracket.
What weight is he? What weight is he, Andrew? 184 or 174?
I think 174. Maybe 184. 180.
Whoa. Wow. Okay. Well, good luck to whichever one you're in up there. But if you're a 184,
Yeah.
you gotta deal with Carter Starachi. So
yeah, just pulling that up. Yes, it is dealing with Carter Starachi. He was subdued at Big Tens, by the way. Since you brought him up, I mean,
well, he still gave one patented Carter Starachi interview afterwards, where to the like of where he's going on about what wrestling means to him, and it's soul versus soul, my 24 hours versus your 24 hours, my dad versus your dad. I'm thinking, okay, this is, I don't know exactly what he's talking about, but it's classic Carter Starachi.
I just saw him. I just see him. I'm like, this guy seems subdued. Like, where's the flair? Like, I think of him, and I think Gable Stevenson now going into professional wrestling and coming back, it's okay to kind of say these things because I know the entertainment side of wrestling is not the same, and I even hate to bring it up, but I pictures Carter Starachi as the closest thing to Ric Flair in college.
Is he like that on the mat, though? Is he? I mean, because I'm asking because I've only experienced him last season and now this season. Is he like? To me,
No.
he's one of the greatest interviews and talkers.
Yes, but not like that on the mat. It's
right.
Just a persona from him on Twitter.
Yeah,
completely opposite on the mat. Nothing like that personality on the mat. But it's just a persona. The interviews, you said he gave one interview, and that's why I was thinking like the other interviews he kind of like seems subdued. I'm waiting for something to pop off on Twitter. Carter said this. Carter said that.
He's been a bit subdued in that regard all season. Like I got my first taste of what he was like last year, and I'm like, oh my goodness, he's coming back. This is tremendous. But he hasn't really popped off a whole lot, so to speak, this whole season. So I don't want to say it's a letdown in that regard. Maybe as a journalist, you're looking for a little more. But wrestling is weird too, in that we don't get to interview. Like even if you went to every Penn State wrestling match, they only bring out like 2 or 3 guys after each match. So, and maybe 2 guys on a Monday or something. So you don't get a chance necessarily to get everybody that's a big time starter every game, so to speak, like you do in football or, so you could go a few weeks without getting Carter, but I think he's even been tame on Twitter, right?
Ever since the preseason, was it the bet about meeting somebody at like 193, was it AJ Ferrari?
Yeah.
Who's at, where's he? Is he? He's not Arizona. Is he Arizona State?
He's out there, yeah. His brother, of course.
His brother's out
Iowa. Who Carter wrestled. Carter's
toughest. With the Gabe Arnold thing, yeah.
Yeah, Carter's toughest, closest matches were against 2 freshmen this year. And I brought that up to his dad the other day, and he's like, well, you got to understand. I guess wrestling is different, right? Because maybe as a freshman, these kids have maybe more confidence. You don't know what you're getting. But Carter, I mean, had his hands full, especially last Sunday. Now, in the end, he made the smoothest moves possible and didn't really look like he was out of control. But, one bad thing happens to you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a Pittsburgh fan, right? No?
Steelers?
Sports fan. No?
I'm a Steelers fan, yes.
Not a Penguins fan.
I have a Lenny Dykstra autographed helmet sitting right there from the field.
How about a Penguins fan? Are you a Penguins fan?
I do like the Penguins.
Okay. Well, I go back to when they were in their run for like 2-3. They were going for what, their 3rd Stanley Cup in a row back in the early 90s.
Yes.
And they let the Islanders hang around to the point. Okay, so then all of a sudden, if you let an opponent hang around, one bad thing can go your way and ruin it, and that's the thing and that's what happened in that series when they lost. And that's what I was thinking when Carter Starachi is in overtime with this freshman. It's like, I know he's in control, but one thing doesn't go there's no room for error anymore, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't seem to matter to him. he looked like he was just at a day in the park, even though it's like sudden victory time or whatever they call it. I don't know. But I don't think I would expect more domination from that man in particular starting next Thursday at the Wells Fargo Center, which I don't think I've ever been to. So I'm excited.
For how long it's there. You never know. Philadelphia, they're going through arena proposals, Chinatown, everything else. We wrap it up with one thing. It's going to be great. I can't wait to see your coverage, guys. Make sure, and ladies and gentlemen, make sure you're following Frank on Twitter, getting all his columns. Great wrestling coverage. Philadelphia is going to be popping off with the NCAA wrestling championships. And I know it's the NCAA tournament. Find time to watch ESPN Matt Madness because it is really fun. I think it's the best job ESPN does covering anything. I really do. I really do. I think it's replaced College Game Day in terms of just the production and how they've done things. Deal a little bit without Billy Baldwin, but that's a whole other story. You got a name to talk about it. Loves wrestling from Long Island. Wanted to touch on this. Penn State basketball with a lawsuit against, Kanye Cleary, former guard, suing Penn State basketball, Penn State University, among others. And I'm just going to read it off here. The suit, which was filed in Philadelphia County Court in November, transferred to the U.S. Middle District Court. Clary sought damages for defamation, racial discrimination, unjust enrichment, unreasonable restraint of trade, and alleges defendants conspired to reduce Clary's NIL value to near zero and refused to properly deal with them. He was suspended in February of 2024. And also intimidation, retaliation, slander, the illegal use of his name, image, and likeness as part of that suspension in 2024. Happy Valley United, Success with Honor, Blueprint Sports Entertainment, and 10 other unnamed individuals, including head coach Mike Rhodes, among others. Normally, when these things come out, people are all over the university. Not in this case, from what I saw on social media. Is this something to majorly pay attention to, Frank, or is this something that it almost seems like sour grapes? You didn't get the role you did when you were held over to a new coach. There seemed to be open disagreements on the court. And when the young man got injured, Penn State seemed to click. And that's multiple color analysis and play-by-play people on TV has said that. He goes out of the lineup. Penn State's lineup seemed to click, never really made it back in the rotation. So in this day and age, how do we look at this on its face value?
Well, I think you look at it first by what you just broke down. What are the mechanics of this situation with this player, and can kind of clearly see what you're describing. You have somebody who it did not click. The team did better without him in the lineup. How many times have you seen that play out in any sport you've watched in your lifetime? You see it play out all the time. Now, NIL makes it maybe a little more complicated because all of a sudden, it's not just, am I playing or not playing? Well, all of a sudden, there's financial ramifications to this that I think open up more legal possibilities. That's where I guess maybe you have to watch a situation like this unfold. There's nothing yet that I've seen that makes me feel like there's maybe any type of real issues on the way Penn State handled this. But if you're suing, for financial losses regarding your name, image, and likeness, and, going on from there. So how does that part of things get settled? I mean, we're in a new age when it comes to legally how these athletes are going to deal with not playing and then in their regard, not getting their deserved money. I'm not sure if we've seen another issue like this regarding a Penn State athlete, regarding NIL to this level. So this could be interesting in only how it will maybe get settled in that regard to me, because it could go for, where does it open up people who just don't get a chance to play and have sour grapes? Where do they stand? What do they have to prove to show that their name, image, and likeness was compromised?
Yeah, the NIL aspect of it, is definitely the complicating factor, as you said, because one, the school, like how much is it's a wild, wild west, and we're getting towards revenue sharing, but how much money or how much, not money, how much contact and pull like athletic department over to Happy Valley United, over to Success with Honor, and what are they even allowed to deal with? Like, from what I know, they're not allowed to talk numbers. So that's where this whole thing gets complicated. Now, I can't find it, but I believe it was reported that Kanye Clary did in the lawsuit voluntarily dismiss the racial discrimination part of the lawsuit. I'd have to double check. I would encourage everybody to double check. So on that, I cannot find where that was reported, but that is what I have here in my notes, that was voluntarily dismissed by him, according to Penn State, put that out there. And I tell you, I've interviewed Coach Rhodes. I interviewed Coach Rhodes back in 2020 in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, and it's an insightful interview. It's available online on my previous institution at fox43.com, because VCU was down in Richmond. Richmond was a hot button issue with Monument Avenue down there. And I interviewed Coach Rhodes because of the connection to Lebanon Valley College. So that interview is available at fox43.com, and you could hear what Coach Rhodes had to say at that point in time during issues related to race in this country. Frank, that pretty much wraps it up for everything that I had on the bingo card for today. Great stuff. You could calm down anybody. Has anybody offered you a job in any White House administration, Democrat or Republican? Because I feel no matter how hot topic of an issue is, you could calm anybody down.
Good point, but yes, it goes beyond just being able to be calm, I think, as far as understanding the issues and relating the pertinent points to those. I'm not sure I'm at that level with politics, okay? Maybe we can get there when it comes to Penn State wrestling. I might be able to get to that point. But how many people do I need to calm down when we're talking Penn State wrestling?
Where do I go on the spectrum of former sports journalists / sports fans of taking the extreme sides and whatever? Because I've been known, when we've been together watching games, I'd always be like one way or another in terms of all the things, and then you would come in with some things. Well, this is more. You're so nuanced. The presentation is on point. You should be working at the highest levels of government, keeping people calm.
I think I would like to. I do not understand why there's so much struggle to get along when it comes to politics and those levels. Like, why is it so hard to see? Like, you have your own points and your own platforms. Why is it so difficult to be just in conversation with someone else? Now, yeah, it's a two-way street, right? Both people have to be willing to be in conversation. I think that's probably where it starts and ends, and maybe we'll just go with that. Okay.
I think it's easier for a lot of people to be calmer talking about politics than it is to be talking about their sports teams. Talk radio is always a hit, especially in Philadelphia, where you're heading. Great stuff, Mr. Godani. Make sure you follow Frank at YDR Penn State all this week. He's going to have some great previews coming out for the NCAA Wrestling Championships. That does it for the Blue White Tailgate Podcast, as we talk about West Shore home field at Beaver Stadium, Penn State wrestling, and also the latest news on Penn State basketball. And don't forget, NCAA hockey tournament. We didn't dive into that. Well, that will be our guest next week. I'm hoping to nail one of those guests down for next week. Maybe Mr. Brian Tripp, the voice of Penn State hockey, to talk a little bit about the Frozen Four tournament coming up. For Frank and Mike, who couldn't make it this week, I'm Andrew Flissa. Thanks for listening.